friends, and welcome to another episode of Your Bish Therapist Podcast. And not just any episode of Your Bish Therapist Podcast, it's M&M Hour with our dear friend Mandy Slutsker. Hi, Mandy.
Hi. Thanks for having me back.
Gosh, of course. Girl, my favorite time of the month. My absolute most favorite time. I feel like, I don't know about you, but for me, I feel like we schedule our thing to record and then I'm just like having a bad day or month or year or life. I don't know what's happening anymore. And I'm just like not feeling Bravo and I'm not feeling this. And then we get on and we podcast and I feel rejuvenated. I feel rested and just happy to be doing it. So thank you for joining me in that.
Yeah.
So today, Mandy and I are actually going to talk about Real Housewives of Miami. And I know y'all are going to be excited for that because I announced that I was covering it and then I just like never.
You never covered it.
Well, because so this is one thing, Mandy, you can attest to is I did cover Miami on my Instagram and I got trolled so hard. So hard. And I'm going to be honest, it really did. I was like, well, forget it. I'm not covering this. I was like, I don't need this grief in my life. I don't need people yelling at me on Instagram that I'm an idiot and, you know, whatever. And we'll talk about like what that post was about. So anyway, I'm glad to be discussing it with all of my people who understand me and love us together. And also Miami has just been giving. It's been
giving.
Really
and
good.
I was telling you that I actually think your takes on Miami are better than your takes on anything else because you don't know the characters yet. So you're seeing the behavior for just what the behavior is. And you're asking yourself, why would someone behave this way? And it's giving different answers than maybe what other people are willing to accept because they are frustrated at the behavior, but they're not interested in knowing why it's happening.
Right.
But that also goes to Guerdy this week where people were like, or at least the other housewives were very judgmental of what she had done. But, you know, in her mind, this was like her only option. So there's like lots of different sides to it. And that's what we like to cover, all of the different sides. And this isn't a podcast format for like all one thing or all another thing, or you have to choose a team, or if you even give the slightest bit of grace to Julia, that then you are like anti-Guerdy. Like it's not like that at all. And so this is a space for people who understand nuance and can accept it.
Boom. And you know what? Sometimes Instagram does not understand nuance. And it really does. It takes a certain amount of emotional intelligence to be able to see that nuance and to not stand someone or to not just be like firmly team whatever. So listen, I understand that's not going to be for everybody. But so one thing before we get into Miami though, because there has been so much amazing stuff going on. You were telling me about an interesting experience you had with a shaman yesterday. And I thought it would be great to talk about this because, you know, we're fully aware within the Bravo verse of, you know, there's lots of, you know, shamans and sweat lodges and all these other things that are always talked about. And so can you share a little bit about that process?
Yeah. So as the listeners are probably aware, I have been sick with a number of respiratory infections over the last 4.5 months. I had COVID and then I had flu and it briefly crossed over into fluvid. And then I got some other sort of virus that made my voice not work. And then that somehow turned into pneumonia and an ear infection. And my dad had a little bit of a intervention with me while I was recovering from pneumonia, where he said, "This is the sickest I've seen you since you were a kid. And it's clearly due to stress. And you need to get a hold of yourself." And he said, surgeons cut up people all day and they go home and they have dinner with their family. They're not thinking about who they cut up. You all day are dealing with the needs of children who are in detention facilities with, with our Customs and Border Protection and lots of other things and what's going on in different humanitarian situations in the world and how many children are going to die because we pulled out of foreign aid funding. And it sticks with me and it's very painful. And the work is like harder and more complicated and there's more of it and I have less help. And it's just like I am working day. I'm working in the evenings. I'm working on weekends. And I don't really have a buffer between me and the world.
Right.
And he was kind of like, in a nice way, saying like, you need to be like a surgeon. And when you're done, you do not think about it. And it was
Can I just say,
brave.
I'm grateful for
Yeah.
him to have shared that, because I kind of gently roasted you about it before too. But in all sincerity, it needed to be said by Papa Slutsker, who we all love. It's that, you are a very empathetic, loving, caring person. And the work that you do is so important. You're saving children's lives. You're trying to better humanity in a world where that's not a popular decision anymore.
Yeah.
I can also imagine you're trying to actively work against things to help people in an administration that wants to do the opposite. And so it's like you're trying to hold up a wall, and you can't only do so much. Mandy Slutsker can only be so much of a part of this puzzle, but I understand that feeling of like, this is so hard because you care about it so much.
That, and I also feel like I have a glimpse into the future that not everyone has, where I know what it means to cut Medicaid by $800 billion. Like, I know what that does to the health system. I know what that does to millions of families. Like, it's going to decimate our
People will
healthcare.
die. People will die from preventable illness, healthcare.
It's going to impact people who have insurance. It's going to impact every single person that ever interacts with the healthcare system in this country. And so like knowing that it's like a slow motion thing and knowing that it's coming, but like not every, I don't know. It's like, it felt like how I felt in January of 2020, where I was like, saw what was going on in Wuhan, China. And I was like, that's coming here. Like, they would not shut people in apartment buildings and not let them leave if this wasn't something terrible and that was making its way. So, and I felt crazy because for the next month and a half, like no one was acknowledging it. I'm like, I see the future, and it makes it just stress. So anyways, I decided, in addition to the, Western medicine that I typically use and, go to doctors and all of that, I was going to cast a wider net to see if I could be healed in any other way. And I found a shaman, shamanic healer, and I went yesterday. And I thought we were going to mainly be talking about like the administration and the stress and the specific things I've been working on, and how like my illnesses have been kind of in line with like specific actions that have been taken and that kind of stuff. And it ended up actually not being about that. She ended up finding something completely different. In that she kept asking more questions, and I kept talking about just different things. And I never used the word safety, but it was clear that I was mentioning a number of times that I have felt unsafe. Both my neighborhood has had, an increase in crime over the last few years. I have been the witness to violent crime. I don't need to go into that more. There was obviously like October 7th and the crime that happened in Israel, and then all of the horrible, horrible genocide. I don't know what you want to call it, but like it's awful, like sins.
Yes.
And then specifically that kind of coming back around to like my home community, where 2 people were murdered, at a venue that I would normally go to, and the people I had, been at my synagogue before. It's just like a constant sort of like feeling of unsafety without really using the word safety. And essentially she like traced it all back to my mom dying and my apartment. This is like my origin story, like everything, where I didn't have like a home and I didn't have like things and I didn't have a mom. And my mom was like the person that made me feel safe. And so I've never kind of like recovered from that. And then, I've done all this work to try and like self-soothe, but that's different than like a feeling of safety and establishing a feeling of safety. And she like did this thing where she like looked at my body and like saged it. And she said, normally people who are anxious kind of lean forward, but you're leaning back. You're looking back, which is more of like a depressive thing, which we'll get back to in a second. And then there was just a lot going on with my hips. And she says hips are where people's like safety lies. And over the last however many years, I've been having issues with my hips. I've been like, that's why I started doing Pilates.
Right.
Anytime we do like certain like figure four. Like it is just it's so tight. It's so hard. And then she also was focusing on my, I guess like a reproductive area, but it was like sort of abdomen. And she kept on asking if I had had surgery and I was like, no, I had my appendix out. She's like, that's not it. We figured out that, and I don't think I've ever shared this publicly, but I have a medical condition that started menopause early. And that was what she was finding in that area. And that is what is causing some issues of like energy misbalance and everything kind of being like kind of inward, like my like rotation of my like legs was in, like everything was like inward and I was not open where the energy could flow easily.
Interesting.
And so she did this whole like thing. It was like an hour and spent all this time with me. And then she said, while we were doing this, like, she mentioned there was like souls surrounding us. I don't know. I know nothing about this stuff. I was like, okay, there's souls. Like, what kind of souls? And then she was like, there was a younger soul. I think that was the younger you. I said, I don't think that's who it was. I said, I think it was my great aunt who I was named after, who was 12 when she was murdered in the Holocaust with her grandmother. Because she kept on saying, your ancestors are around you and you are holding on to them as if it's almost like, she didn't use this word, but like a burden, like they're weighing you down, but they're actually there to surround you and provide safety.
Right.
But you are holding on to the stories of your ancestors' experience. And it is like weighing you. It's weighing you back. It's why you're leaning back in your posture. It's like all these different things. And so, something that I have learned through therapy is epigenetics and, the passing on of sort of trauma, and there's a lot of, I guess, studies, especially of the African-American community in the United States who has experienced slavery and like exactly what the impacts are generation after generation that continue. And, the same goes true with Ashkenazi Jews from Eastern Europe. And like, I'm only 1 degree away of someone in my family, my father, who had to flee for his life. Right. So like how that has actually all impacted me and that my main issue is recreating a sense of safety. Mm-hmm. And that like, she was like, the administration was just sort of what tipped the scale. Right. But like you were already overflown.
And what I think is so interesting is like what you're experiencing in your job is exactly the same issues that she's talking about with your ancestors. Mm-hmm. It's these really horrific issues of basic human rights being violated and people who you love and, people who should be cared about receiving they're not safe in their own ways. And so I do think it's so interesting, not to therapize you too much, but like how that's the through line of your life in personal, professional, and really a lot of ways through no fault of your own. And I do think that generational trauma piece with epigenetics is like how much of that fear and sense of like lack of safety comes from, again, when you lose, an aunt, a 12-year-old aunt who you're named after in the Holocaust, it's like, it's just so much for you.
It's a lot. And I don't ever remember not knowing that story. Like truly, I don't remember anyone ever telling me that story. I just remember always knowing. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of just interesting pieces. The thing where she was like, do you still feel your mother? And I said, yes, I feel her, but mainly through my work. So my mom was a medical social worker and she worked at a hospital that did not take government money and did not take insurance. And after the financial crisis in 2008, the hospital could no longer operate using that model. And they needed to know if people had insurance just so that they could bill insurance and get money. And one of the main insurance that people have is Medicaid. And in order to find out whether or not people qualify for Medicaid, you have to know whether or not they're a U.S. citizen. And as a medical social worker, my mom, as part of the care team, would have to like figure out whether or not they qualified for Medicaid. And she refused. She said, I will not do that as part of my ethical responsibilities as a social worker between me and my clients. I will not do anything that would break trust. Right. I'm trying to establish trust. And it is not my job to make sure that the hospital gets, reimbursed. Like,
Good
that's
for
not
her. Yeah.
me. And so she retired early in protest.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I am working a lot in the immigration space, and for the rights of children and asylum seekers and refugees to be able to access healthcare and to be able to access Head Start and to be able to access programs, like that's how I feel close to her, because I'm like, this was what her life's mission was
Mm-hmm.
to support, families and children that needed support.
Right. And I think it's just such a testament to your family. I mean, you come from such a line of really fiercely amazing people who are just loving and caring, and they want to do the right thing and help the world and all this other stuff. But I think what you're realizing is that for you, there has to be a line where a healthier boundary
Yeah.
between you and that important work. Because what I can tell you is that, as a therapist too, if that important work is so hard and it's so grating and it's so challenging that if you don't have better boundaries with yourself, these things are going to continue to happen. And it won't just be a temporary physical illness. It'll be yeah.
No, I know.
Right.
Well aware that I was like, I'm going to cast a wide net. If I need to get a crystal, I'm going to get a crystal. If I need to see a shaman, I'm going to see a shaman.
Yeah.
I've like looked into going to sound baths. I'm like using,
Man,
I
would love
have
to
a
go with you to that,
therapist.
by the way.
Yeah, I'm
Yes,
just
I'm in.
trying to, again, cast a wide net.
You're using all the tools in your
I was like, there's
tool
got to
belt.
be, and I'm not willing to do acupuncture. I know a ton of people have.
I live by it.
I have tried it. It is not for me.
Well,
And I've
that's
tried it
fair.
like at least 10 times. I don't like needles, and I can't get over it. It's
Well,
even
that's
though you don't
okay.
feel them, it makes me so uncomfortable.
No, you
that I
do feel
cannot.
them.
I mean,
Whoever
I
says
don't
you
like
don't
it.
feel them, that's a lie. And that's totally fair. Acupuncture is something I do weekly consistently because it's one of the few things that really does help me. But you do definitely feel the needles, and it's like, it's certainly not for everyone. But what I give you a lot of credit for is, we joke about like men on Bravo, doing this like non-therapy to help them. Like, you're an example of someone who you're using all of the tools in your tool belt, because
Yeah.
I believe that the best sort of treatment is a menagerie of all of these beautiful things, right? I mean, we have so many of these things at our disposal, and why not use them? And I find it so interesting that she was able to pick up on that medical issue.
That
Is
was really
so
scary,
fascinating.
kind of, where I was like, well, why do you know something's happening there? And I didn't
Well,
put it
yeah.
together. I was just like, what? But yeah, it was eye-opening, and I now hope to take what I've learned and apply it with a licensed therapist.
Right.
To go through, like,
Yes.
how do I reestablish a sense of safety? I didn't realize I didn't have that.
Yeah. And, it's so interesting because there's something called the hierarchy of needs by Abraham Maslow. And Maslow said that, our needs, it's kind of like a pyramid. And at the bottom is basic safety needs. So basically, having a roof over our head, food in our bellies, being not threatened with, harm or what have you. And I think that it's in psychology, you can't get to any of the other levels without, I mean, it's not an MLM, but you know what I mean? Like, you can't.
No, I know. And I didn't realize that my basic level was fucked. I thought I was doing fine. I was like, I have an apartment now. Like, it's not burned down,
Right. You're not living technically in a war zone, but I mean, I feel like that's changing maybe every day. And, whether it's from the lack of safety of your ancestors in the Holocaust.
I think that combined with what has happened in my life with not having a home for a period of time and losing my mom. And that was sort of my safety.
Yes.
To violence that has occurred in recent months. I didn't realize how much that was a through line and causing according to her blockages in my chakras and stuff like that. So
regardless of the blockages and the chakras, I
she didn't use the term blockages. Like every time I use a certain term, she was like, that's not what I said. I'm like, I can't remember all the phrases that you used, but that's how I interpreted it, is that like I needed to like open things so that energy could flow easier through me.
Right. And I think too, it just speaks to the fact that our body feels what we repress, our body is going to express. That's just how it is. And I think that, losing your mom, grief is one of those things, especially with a parent, a very important figure in your life. I don't, people talk a lot about grief in the psychology space. And I just want to be really clear that there's no getting over that. There's no getting past it. There's no, that fundamentally changed your entire life, losing your mother. And so I just want to acknowledge that and have you hear me acknowledge that, because I think some people feel sometimes, well, it's like society, we talked on part 1 of your podcast about people don't like to have uncomfortable conversations. And this is one of those uncomfortable conversations. People do not like to talk about grief. They do not like to talk about, losing a parent or the feelings that come with that. And to me, that's something I want to lean into, because it's like, that's how we work towards healing. That's how you work towards feeling a sense of safety, being able to feel safe with those emotions. And so I'm so grateful that you had this experience, because it gives you at least an awareness of some blind spots that you had, that now you can attend to them. And guess what that is? That's creating your own safety.
Yay. I left and I was like, she was spent like 20 extra minutes with me, and this like guy was waiting in the hallway, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like that messed up that like you need to like delay. People on the East Coast are on time.
Oh,
I was just like, oh my God. And she just was like, no, we're going to still sit here. I need to like sit with you after this like session. And I was just like, oh God.
Listen, you're not more fucked up than anybody else.
I don't think I am. That's the thing.
You're not.
I was like, I'm doing fine. I just keep getting sick.
But I think the reason she needed extra time is because you don't give yourself the opportunity to attend to yourself very often.
Yeah.
So I think for me that it was like the extra time is more about giving you what you need, instead of you being like, you're not crazy. You're not out of your mind. You're not problematic. You're a human that's experiencing very real issues. It's just, you and I are the type of people that, especially as a therapist, I spent my whole life attending to others and ignoring myself. And then my body had to literally stop and implode before I paid attention. And it makes me sad to know that, but it makes me happy that you are intervening before it hits that level.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of courage, and I'm proud of you.
Thanks. It's also kind of embarrassing getting like so sick.
Why is that embarrassing?
Like, it's just like, who gets sick like this?
Lots of people.
And like going into the urgent care and then being like, you actually need the ER. And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean I need the ER? They're like, your blood oxygen is like too low. Well, I mean, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I didn't realize I wasn't breathing. Like where I think I like downplay certain things, like when we were together the day before I was in the hospital, and I was like, I'm fine.
And I was like, Mandy, you're definitely not fine. I was like, I know you. I basically yelled at you on the podcast. I was like,
I know.
This
and
is
I just
not
like,
fine.
And like a few hours later, I was like, she's right. I feel worse.
But here's what I want people listening to this too, because I think they're relating probably, is that I don't want you to package that shame and guilt for not attending to yourself, because then what happens is then you just don't attend to yourself more because you feel shame and guilt. So yes, it does suck that you haven't given yourself as much as you need, but what a gift it is to realize it now before it's, really to a point where like now I'm dealing with a chronic cancer. I have chronic neurological issues because I had so much trauma that I helped other people with their stuff, and I worked on my stuff too, but not as much as I needed. I just wouldn't attend to me until my body physically screeched to a halt and was like, bitch, listen up. So I just want to normalize that and validate that for you, just because I care about you a lot and I don't want you to be too hard on yourself, because it's a human thing to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thanks to the listeners. Hopefully I didn't scare any of you with like all my most private and innermost demons and thoughts.
Listen, these peeps love you. They love you. And I guarantee they're happy to hear it. They're happy for you to share it. And I guarantee there's people learning from this.
What was funny is I was at Shabbat dinner that I hosted last night. And I was telling a couple of the people about the ancestor thing and the Holocaust ancestors be there, and that I carry that I carry the weight. I think that's what she said. The weight of that I carry. And someone's like, yeah, that's what it means to be Jewish. We're all at a Shabbat dinner and yeah, dude, what do you mean you don't carry the burden of it's that is literally our entire experience.
Right. But that must have been very validating to you too.
Oh yeah, we were all laughing. We were all yeah, this is why we all have anxiety disorder.
Right. You're like, ha ha ha, all of our, the genocide that has created all of our anxiety.
But even before the Holocaust, that's what people don't realize. It's so many, it was the Tsar, and it was, there was just so many unsafe places, Yeah. But one thing that's pretty funny, and then we should definitely move on to Miami, is that Stassi, while I was sick, started behaving weird and started having some bladder issues, where she peed in the house, in my dad and Joyce's house in Minnesota, and they were less than thrilled. And then she would go outside on a walk for 30 minutes and she would pee 10 times. And it would be, not every time would be a pee. It would be a trying to get in the pee position, but nothing was coming out. And my stepmom was convinced that she had a UTI. And I was convinced she did not, because she has never had a UTI. I was I think it's psychological. I think she knows I'm sick and could hear the fact that I couldn't breathe and was stressed.
Yeah. And anxious.
And plus we moved from one city to another, and that's stressful, a new environment. And so my stepmom was we got to bring her to the doggy, the vet. So the vet essentially found nothing other than her urine was dilute because she has some kidney issues. And then I went to a specialist to follow up with her normal issues. Which are kidney and inflammatory bowel disease. They ran through all the testing. I collected her urine for 3 days. It's disgusting. I had to keep it in my fridge and then combine them all. And then I actually gagged. I was so close to vomiting when I was combining the urine. It made me late to the appointment. And I was I'm so sorry. I have such a gag reflex. And then went to this appointment, and essentially she was diagnosed with it's basically in her head.
Doggy anxiety?
It's not just doggy anxiety. It's called it's something that's an issue if humans are having psychosis and they can't stop drinking. Do you know what I'm talking about? Psychogenic. Okay, psychogenic polydipsia.
Stop that right now. She was so in tune to you that she literally was
But she started doing it again, which is what freaked me out. And I was not sick again when she started doing it in a less intense, but it's a compulsive water consumption due to psychological factors like anxiety, stress, or boredom. And it involves ruling out other potential causes of excessive thirst, such as kidney disease, which she has kidney disease. But essentially, and the reason that we figured it out is that if I give her a small amount of trazodone, it goes away. So my dad's oh, she's Ashkenazi too.
She's got those epigenetics, honey. Stassi's got those epigenetics.
The ancestors are surrounding her.
They really are. And she's I gotta pee. Well, because do you know, interestingly, in people, when people have anxiety, because of the way our anatomy is, and I can't remember exactly, but when people have a lot of anxiety, we tend to pee a lot because of there's something above the bladder that, God, I'm blanking on the exact term for it, that creates that sense of you constantly have to go to the bathroom when you're nervous.
Yes.
So that's super interesting. And I do have to say this. So when I was 17 and I had cancer, my parents got me a dog. And as soon as I lost my hair, would you know that dog would sleep above my head in this position, which you can't see if you're listening to the podcast. She would sleep above my head. So her belly was covering my bald head. And when I started to get better and my hair grew back, she moved to the foot of my bed. And then when I was in remission, she never slept in my room again.
Wow.
I just think that dogs are these intuitive little, like we talked about in your podcast with children, there's these intuitive little creatures. And you and Stassi, you guys are just ride or dies. And I think she gets you and you get her. And there we have it.
Just two neurotic Jews.
Two neurotic Jews trying to make their way in the world, honey.
But when I got this diagnosis and I read it aloud, because my dad was like so pissed that she was like peeing in the house. Like he was just like, what the fuck? Like she doesn't ever do this to you in your home. Like, why is it like, and I was like, well, she's psychologically unwell.
She's reacting to me
he's
being
like, join the club.
Well. Yeah. Is anyone listening to the Psychologically Well? If you are, we'd love to hear from you because no one here is doing a great job. But thank you, Mandy, for sharing that. And, I know you'll get a lot of support, but we send you all the love in the world. And personally, I can't wait to hear more about this process because I think this will be really helpful for you long term. So let's get into Miami because you have convinced me to watch it, and Miami has been so good. So on Mandy's podcast, we talked about Real Housewives of Orange County and Real Housewives of Atlanta. And to me, Miami is just like the best housewives on TV right now.
I mean, I love it.
Amazing.
I have always been into again, how it visually presents, where it's like a bright city with bright colors and they're wearing bright colors and everything is like visually appealing. Even the cancer life celebration where it was like all white and I don't know, it just was everything is so visually appealing. And also Guerdy being one of the best party planners and wedding planners in the entire country, not just Miami. She has gotten awards. What she can create visually, I would love for her to throw a party in every single episode so I could just
seriously
see. And her husband even was like, this is what she does. This is her magic.
Right. And clearly she has a gift with that for sure. But the one thing, we were texting about this and I was like, I had no notes on OC because I feel like OC is lame and snooze-worthy. The Valley,
I love it though.
I know, Mandy does love it. So if you're loving it and she loves it, listen to part 1 because I was just like, but The Valley, I'm tired of talking about it too. But Real Housewives of Miami, the one major thing I wanted to talk about was the narcissism party.
Yes.
I was like, oh my God, I could write a dissertation on this. First of all, okay. So the one thing I texted you was that I noticed that Alexia, she just likes to sign up to have men tell her what she needs to do. That was one of my things that I realized. And so this is why she's been married 3 times. She found this narcissistic, I don't know what he was, life coach. Do you know what his title was?
I mean, he probably had the same accreditation as my shaman, but yes.
Probably. And so she found this guy on Instagram and then she's like, oh, I like what you're saying and you're really attractive. So I'm going to hitch my wagon to your train. And then she went to lunch and there was a male waiter and she was like, what do you recommend? And he said something. She's like, I'll have that. And I'm like, you don't even want to know what it is? What if it is something you don't like in it? I don't know. It was just so clear to me that I feel like she has this pattern of having men make decisions for her, which is why she's so anxious. Because anxiety is just about lack of control, basically. And so she's anxious because she's giving all these men, especially Todd, all of her control and power. So of course you're going to be anxious. You're letting this man walk all over you and he's turning you into a flip-flopper where you're saying he's a terrible guy and then all of a sudden you're working it out and now he's great. And it's well, no one buys that bag of bullshit.
I wish I could talk to, and this would be so mean, so mean. So I actually don't wish I would do it. But the one thing that Alexia holds dearer than anyone else is her children. And her son, Frankie in particular, focus on the fact that Todd hurt Frankie.
Yeah.
And so now you want to be intimate with this man who hurt the most important person in your life. One of the her 2 children are the 2 most important people in her life.
For sure.
That she needs to have a boundary with that. He caused pain to Frankie and he left and Frankie didn't know what was going on and felt abandoned in his home that you created to keep him safe. And that's where I feel she should be that's it. But I think she also, and I don't know if it's a sexual desire or what, that she feels more drawn to Todd than anyone else. And she cannot even imagine another man. And I think that is a really hard place to be because when you're infatuated with someone, it's really hard to imagine ever being infatuated with anyone else. But it's very unhealthy to be divorced, to then be dating and having sex. And then like, it's clearly upsetting Frankie. Anytime it's mentioned, he's just like, I don't want to see you sad. I don't want to see you cry, Mom. Like,
Right.
I wish she could just lean into that as her way of getting out from like under the spell of Todd.
Right. Which I think infatuation is a good word, because whatever she and Todd are doing is unsustainable. And I don't know where things stand today, because obviously this was filmed previously.
It's
but
back and forth still. Like she was on Watch What Happens Live after the first episode. And it's like, when was the last time you were intimate with Todd? And she was like, yesterday or something.
It's just so sad, because I don't think she realizes how she is creating her own issues and causing her own unhappiness, because this is unsustainable. Because what Todd is doing, which is what all good people with some really good narcissistic traits do, is he convinced her to give him what he wants, which is like, there's not a real commitment because they're not really together. So he's having his cake and eating it too, essentially. And he's getting her so hooked on it that it feels like there's an addictive quality, if I'm being honest, with Alexia and Todd. It feels like a sex addiction, a love addiction, infatuation, which is not what a healthy relationship is supposed to be. But I agree with you. It's sad that she can't, because she loves those kids more than anything else. It's like with Brittany, I think Cruz helped her wake up to what she was really enduring. But I think because her kids are older, that she doesn't, it's like you don't take it as seriously, which is so frustrating, because older kids' emotions matter just as much as younger kids do. For some reason, adults have this thing of like, well, they're in an adult body now, so they should be able to manage this. And it's like, well, their brain's not totally developed. And they're just in bigger bodies.
He's going to live with her until she passes.
Right.
That is the plan.
Because he has those issues, intellectual disabilities following the accident, right? Yes.
Yeah, he has a number of issues with that. And so it's really like he is in your home and you're causing chaos in your home, and you're bringing that into your home where your son is. And I wish that, I feel like if it was presented to her that way, she would then feel very guilty, which I don't want her to feel like she's like harming her son by having Todd around. But I just think she needs to rip the Band-Aid, but it does feel like an addiction where it's like, I can't do it unless there's something else to replace the addiction with,
Yes, which is like we talked about that with, I forget already which housewife going not housewife, with Michelle from the Valley.
Yes.
We talked about people who are in chronic relationships. You don't give yourself the opportunity to develop those independence and those skills that you need to self-sustain. So, that's really interesting. But so that going back to this narcissism party, which was so bizarre, because it was like, the guy that was leading it, so she found him on Instagram or TikTok or something, and she just loved the quotes. And so here's my beef. This is my beef. The term narcissism is probably one of the most overused terms in the modern lexicon, especially on TV. The term narcissist means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Narcissistic personality disorder is a pattern of inflexible and persistent traits that lead to personality disorder. Now, all humans, you, Mandy, me, everybody, have narcissistic traits and tendencies. All of us do, okay? But it's on a spectrum. So if you think about something on a continuum, to the left is going to be very little traits and tendencies. In the middle is going to be average. And then to the right is where you're going to have some of those traits and tendencies move over into personality disorder. Okay. So when people talk about you're a narcissist, it makes me feel rage. It's like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean they're selfish? They don't care about other people? They lack empathy? What is it that you are trying to say?
I think they were all trying to say you're self-focused, especially when it comes to Lisa. And the word narcissism comes from Narcissus, the Greek god who was obsessed at looking at themselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
And it's just so funny that all the stuff was on mirrors. I'm sure that was,
I'm sure that was
on
purposeful.
purpose.
Yes.
But then that Lisa was the one that wanted to look in the mirrors but not see the quotes, and then did this whole like fashion shoot. Like she is like
Yep.
the queen, like she is narcissist. Like, and
Yes.
from her, I don't think it comes from a bad place, but her level of self-involvement does make it so she doesn't see other people's issues. And she always believes, like she did say, it's like, I'm sorry that my problems are bigger than everyone else's.
Oh
And
my
it's like,
God, Mandy, I
Lisa,
can't.
Lisa,
Yeah.
that is making yourself a victim. Your problems are bigger than everyone else's last season when you were going through the divorce with Lenny.
Right.
Yes, the divorce is continuing, but you were no longer in that immediate danger, in that immediate state where you didn't know where you were going to live with your kids and your husband leaving you and all of that stuff. Like, and it's not that no one else is experiencing anything. Like that's what's she just. But then at the same time, she was the one that stayed with Guerdy this past week when everyone, a lot of people got up and left Guerdy's party. So like she has empathy in her, but she is very self-focused. And so I feel like it's this like within her, like a struggle where like her intention is good, but her like kind of factory setting is like victim.
Default factory. Yes, I love that. Yes, Mandy, her factory default setting is victim. And you pointed out something so hilarious is that Lisa, again, was like looking in the mirror, like captivated, like Narcissus, and completely ignoring the quotes. And it's like, that's what this is about. You are playing into this, lady.
That game that they had with putting those red flags was clearly meant to cause a problem. And he's like, this was just meant to be an exercise. There is never an exercise where you are telling other people negative qualities about them that is going to lead to anything positive.
Can I also say I had such a problem with this party for one major reason is that the ladies were brought there under false pretenses, number one, and this quote unquote expert did this with the ladies without their consent. And that is one of the things that I was like, this person, I don't give a shit if you wrote 3 books, because Alexia was like, oh, he's more legit than these other people because he wrote 3 books. And it's like, no, he's not. Anyone could write a book. I could write a book tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which, who knows, maybe I will. But the main problem with this, which I cannot overstate enough, is when you are using an intervention or you're doing something with people, if they are not giving consent, that is unethical to the nth degree. And I think that it was a setup. And it was not meant to have a conversation. This guy was Alexia's minion, and he was happy to be getting his 15 minutes to fucking hawk his books or whatever. And then, they're all clearly putting these flags in Lisa's cup, which, listen, I'm not saying she didn't deserve that because, like, if you're just playing the game, Lisa is, like we already talked about, she has a lot of these traits and tendencies. But it's just, to me, it was such a clusterfuck to just create bad feelings. And when you're a quote unquote professional and you're doing something and it's negatively impacting people's mental health, you're a fraud. Sorry.
Well, he's not a mental health professional. He's just like a quote unquote narcissism expert. Anyone could say they're a narcissism expert. But what I appreciated though was Adriana saying, guys, like she just lost her father. Like that was what felt to me like it was not the right time.
But to your point,
not that there's ever a right time for it, but like, oh my God, not right then.
Yeah, really not right now. But I don't think it was so much about that. It was the way that it was done. And again, if she had given consent to participate in this, that might have been very different. But it did feel like an ambush that this quote unquote professional helped facilitate. But I think to your point about whenever a housewife or someone is like, well, you can't hold me accountable because I'm having a hard time, that's always manipulation. It just is. Because could you imagine, Mandy, if every time something went sideways with me, if I was like, well, I have cancer and I'm not going to live, right? It's chronic and I'm not going to survive. I'd win every argument.
Yeah.
You can't just feel like throw out and weaponize your shit.
Like for 2 weeks, just give someone a pass on the death. Like I just am like, she's in the throes of it right now. I know she's filming a show, but oh my God, it just felt like not the right Like she was clearly on edge and she couldn't even sit through whatever that other dinner was where she was like, my dad just died. Like, I can't do this.
But don't you think she's also using it to like,
I don't know. She uses other things, but like this one feels a little different to me. If she was saying it about her divorce or something else, I'd be like, okay, you've been going through divorce forever. Like, no. But I feel like they've been ganging up on her the way that they've been kind of ganging up on Lisa. And then with Guerdy, they've been sort of not listening to Guerdy.
Yes,
which feels different than a gang up, but like.
Well, I think with Lisa, so my impression about the dad stuff is that, she had this very complicated, not really relationship with her dad until recently. And then he passed and she felt guilt and regret over not building that relationship sooner. But I just want people to hear on this podcast that like nobody wants to have to cut off a family member. But sometimes it's life-saving and it's really necessary. People aren't going to understand that. Like if you come from good people who just made mistakes, you're not going to understand, as someone who lived with literally an antisocial person who wanted to hurt me day in and day out, that's different than living with like a parent who loves you but is just not perfect. And so I don't think that anyone can judge. I know this is coming from her grief, right? Because her grief is saying, I wish that I would have done this sooner. So you should never not talk to and it's like, well, that's not fair. And that's very invalidating to people who don't have relationships with their parents for very good reason. But it's appropriate and understandable for Lisa to feel how she feels. So I think her grief is very complex because when you have a complex relationship with a parent and then that parent dies, it can turn into what's called complicated grief, which is, the grief process is hard enough, but complex grief, it's just a little bit on a level that it's just harder to navigate. And for you, as someone who's navigated a lot of grief, you know how hard it is, period.
Yeah.
And I think that's what she's struggling with, is that complex understanding of like, not everybody needs to make amends with a parent who's hurt them, but I can understand that this is really throwing you off your axis. I can get that. So the other thing that I definitely want to point out is that this new housewife, Stephanie, is one of my favorite new housewives to ever join a show. And I'm going to tell you why. Stephanie is a badass bitch, okay? She works hard. She is direct. And you know me, I love a direct communicator. Me and Stephanie, we could hang out and get along all day because I like someone who's just going to be direct and tell you what it is and there's no bullshit. But she also has a kindness, like an empathy and she's not one of those people who's going to tell you how it is and then just be like a dick. She just seems really wonderful. What do you think?
I love her for the show, for sure, because she is willing to call out shit. However, I believe she has a lot of shit that needs to be called out, and that probably will be maybe on a next season. Because, and again, I don't want to believe every rumor, but it does seem that she started her relationship with her husband while he was previously married, and that the money that he got for allegedly starting his big company was from his ex-wife's father. That ex-wife and children do not speak to Stephanie, or is his name Mahmoud?
Masood, I think.
And so I think there's something there in the fact that her sisters won't talk to her. Like, I think there's something going on with her where she's got some problems. But for the show, I love that she's calling out Alexia and like, Todd sucks. Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And then, and then backing off and being like, I'm sorry, I never meant to hurt you. I just think you're so wonderful. Right. Which is true. I love that she called out Lisa for being late. And then after all of that was like, hey, like, girl, just, it's my thing. It's my pet peeve. Like, we're all good.
Yes. But guess what? Guess who wasn't late the next time?
Yep.
So here's the thing. And Marisol made a joke about Stephanie did in one day what we couldn't do in 12 years. And it's like, well, no shit, because she actually called her out on it. And here's the thing. I remember in grad school, my professor was given an example of how to change children's behaviors. And he gave this example of like, if you have a kid and you're going to get ice cream, but they're chronically, whining, running late, whatever, if you leave without that child and they have the consequence of staying home, next time they're going to be, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, this wasn't the exact conversation. Next time they're going to understand that you mean business and they're going to, make it work to get the ice cream. And it was the same thing with Lisa. And personally, I'm going to be honest, punctuality is my pet peeve as well. I am usually, to me, my grandfather taught me, if you are not 10 minutes early, you're late. And I live and I die by that. And also I'm very respectful of people's time. And I think with Lisa, while that may not be her intent, if you're 2.5 hours late, you're not respecting other people's time. You're just not. It's just not appropriate. But the other women were like shocked that they couldn't accomplish this. But it's like, well, you can't accomplish it if you don't call somebody out on it. And if these women, that's the thing, they just let Lisa do all this stuff. And it's like, well, no wonder why her behaviors are the same. Like, you have to call people out on that. So I thought that was really interesting, though, because the production laughed when they were like, do you think Lisa will be on time? Production laughed, but guess what? She was. So
she was on time. Now,
I have consequences.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So on the more recent episode with the celebration of life party that Guerdy threw in honor of her being cancer-free, I thought it was so beautiful, and like the whole premise was so beautiful. But then, and I think there's pieces that we're missing, right? In like the real story, like if there was an after show, we would probably find out more of why she chose this venue to show text messages between her and Julia. I also caught that Jen Fessler was like in the background of the show. And it turns out that Jen Fessler was on this Captain Sandy cruise where all of the shit went down and verified Guerdy's version of events. And, I don't really understand like the fight. Like, I don't understand exactly what Julia lied about because it's like, what do you mean? So Guerdy was upset that she was seated in a different area for a dinner and that you kind of like left her on her own and that she begged to come with you. And it turns out like she did not beg to come with you. She offered to come with you. And then you kind of like weren't very hospitable towards her. I think it all could have been handled differently by all of them. But I'm trying to understand, like, do you think that Julia was telling everyone her version and they were all believing her version? And so Guerdy felt she had to like prove that Julia was lying? Or like, I can't figure out why she used this venue. It just felt like such a... Like,
I'm going to tell you why.
Like in poor taste because...
It was. It was in poor taste. And it was not like Guerdy, but I'm going to tell you what exactly I think it is. So I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. And what I think happens is Guerdy's world was rocked by cancer. And cancer survivorship always includes post-traumatic stress in some way, shape, or form. And so what I think happened is that Guerdy, her survival, from what I get from this party, what it means to her is no longer taking things that she doesn't feel are not hers to take. And what happens is trauma survivors and cancer survivors end up getting what I'm going to call a black and white idea of truth and justice. And I think when we try to correct behavior, we tend to overcorrect initially. And I believe this was Guerdy's. She felt like it was her party. She was empowered. And I think she saw it as a truth-telling justice scenario, but her trauma and her recent survivorship was clouding her brain in terms of like, it's like a Tamara thing where you think you can say whatever you want and it's justified because it's how you feel. But that's not how the world works.
Yeah.
So that is my best guess. What I wrote down, I think Guerdy is overcorrecting in the name of survivorship. She now feels like she has a voice, and I think she's just going a little bit left with it because Guerdy doesn't like feeling misunderstood. Most trauma survivors don't. And I'm going to speak for me. People misunderstand me on this podcast all the time, and I'm going to tell you nothing makes me crazier than that. People who are just determined to misunderstand you. And I think that Guerdy felt misunderstood and she felt like the ladies weren't understanding that she didn't, like, she had this very black and white piece of like, I didn't beg to go on this cruise. But when you start getting into the weeds with semantics, I feel like that's how you know, like you're going off track a little bit.
Yeah, because I was like, who cares? Like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, so Julia lied. But like, for whatever reason, I think she feels like the group is choosing Julia's side.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's because of the story. I think Julia has been more not kissing ass, but like spending time with the women outside the show. Like it's very
Right.
clear from last season to this season that she has developed more deep friendships and spent more time with people on the show in her real life when there are no cameras rolling, and that those
Yeah.
friendships have gotten deeper. And I think because Guerdy's been dealing with so much, she hasn't been devoting that time. And
Right.
her best friend, Nicole, is no longer on the show. And so she used to, and
Correct.
I think Nicole was kind of like helped kind of bring some
Like a
of like
bridge.
a bridge
Yeah.
with some of the other folks. Although like Alexia and them all had an issue with her. But I just believe that Guerdy is, I don't know, just like, I'm like, just be yourself, Guerdy, and like people will love you. But you're just like not spending the time and guarded. And honestly, I think it's because a lot of things happened like outside the show that make them not trust these women. Like allegedly, according to Dr. Nicole, Marisol sent someone to follow her, to follow Nicole, to try and dig up dirt on her so she could use it on the show to like dethrone Nicole as a housewife and get her to be the housewife because she's a friend of. I don't know whether there's any truth to this, but I trust Dr. Nicole probably more than any housewife in the history of housewives in terms of just like, I just don't think she says bullshit.
Right.
And so like, then it's really like for us, like I love watching Marisol as a character on a show. But if I was with her on the show and I knew she was pulling these kinds of things, like I would be afraid of being around her and I wouldn't want to necessarily be around people that were around her. And Julie is now around her. And so I feel like
Right.
Guerdy is also like looking for reasons to not trust Julia in the same way.
Right.
And I think we know why Julia is behaving the way towards Guerdy. It just, the whole thing sucks. And it sucks that we didn't see anyone like really stick up for Guerdy when the water was thrown. Like that is so egregious and so not okay. Like it's so many layers.
But I think
Yeah.
Guerdy, I think to that point, I think she feels like on an island. And I think that
Yes.
she showed these texts because she doesn't have her support of Dr. Nicole. I think she's feeling left out because when you deal with cancer, like she was doing other things, right? She was devoting her time to herself and her family in ways that were unavoidable, but I think it does make her feel left out. So she feels misunderstood. She feels left out. She feels on an island. And I think this is coming from a place if she wants people to understand her. But the way that she did it was so gross. And also, it undercut her, which that's
it
how I know
completely undercut her.
But that's how I know she's moving from a place of trauma. Because trauma survivors, they do things that undercut their ultimate tone, but they don't realize that it's undercutting them because they're so focused on trying to be heard. So that's what I see anyway.
No, that's 100% right. I think she was focused on trying to be heard. These women are there under the premise of like celebrating your life and you surviving cancer. And they're all feeling really good about it and really proud of her and saying really nice things about her and acknowledging the work that like her husband and her family did. And so then for it to completely turn and then I'm just going to like blast a friend. It's sort of like, isn't this about surviving cancer? Like that's so much bigger than an argument between friends. And then at the same time, I think one of the worst things you can do as a housewife is leak like private texts.
Yeah.
Because then everyone else doesn't trust that like your conversation with that person is private. And so like that's something to get the women to turn on you so quickly because then they won't trust you at all. Like if it doesn't matter that Julia lied. It doesn't matter that Julia, it's like they don't trust Guerdy now. And so she just dug herself a hole, which is so frustrating. And it's like, I wish she had a friend to like run this by. And I wish Russell would have been like, girl, like this is not the moment. She like sent him away for her to do her dirty shit. And so then is it really a party without your husband and kids? Is it really a celebration party? Or is it now just all of your friends that hate those housewives that are staying around and building you up and telling you that you're the like, like amazing and they all are horrible then why be on the show, Guerdy, if you like don't want to be? Like, these women are on the show.
Right.
If anything,
And it also,
yeah.
It didn't accomplish anything either, because as Larsa, the only thing I agreed with Larsa on, because I just cannot stand her. But when Larsa was like, it was like paragraphs of text that you couldn't even read. So it's like you also didn't even accomplish your goal, because it was not palatable information. It was like just these texts up there on the screen, and then Guerdy's talking and you're like, what's going on? And then it was just so, it just told me that she was moving from a place of something not good. And unfortunately, now she's going to have to suffer the consequences of this, because how is anyone in this group going to trust her if she's going to sabotage her own event?
Yeah.
In
she
this
really
way.
did. And everyone's there's
so
a lot of
wild.
people online that are like very supportive of Guerdy, and I totally get it. And they're like, she had every right. And it's like,
no, she didn't.
It's like not effective. So why do something that's not effective? And the thing is that because it feels good. A lot of people are like, oh, do it because it feels good. And I hate that. That is like one of my biggest pet peeves, is doing something that you say is to like get back at someone, or say is to advocate for a cause by posting some like inflammatory thing on social media. And I'm like, you are literally accomplishing nothing. This is you being like, it's almost like selfish to then do something just because it feels good to you. Like,
and then we're back to the narcissism.
Exactly. I was like, Guerdy, you're not. Oh my God. But one thing I have to point out is I was obsessed with Guerdy's outfit at the Karamo dinner with the LGBTQ, where oh my God, she had like a bralette and these like sequin bralette, sequin pants, and like sequined jacket. And then her makeup like delicately like brought out the colors of the sequin. Like, it was gorgeous. I was literally like, Guerdy, like, that is such a good outfit. Like, she literally looked like Barbie. I'm like, that is when I was a kid. That's the outfit that I would dress up dolls in. Like, complete sequins. Like, it was beautiful. It was so fun.
Yeah.
And everyone was getting along. And to know that and this also goes back to what I said on part 1 of M&M Hour of like a statute of limitations and friendships.
Right.
This was not like this was within the statute of limitations, but she was upset that Julia brought up their issues publicly at the narcissism party. She was like, she broke it. And so she broke it, so all gloves are off. But I don't know that Julia viewed that as breaking the agreement.
I think Julia, to be honest, legitimately was like taking the time to ask this guy, because here's the thing. If that wasn't what it was, she could have said exactly what happened. She just kept it to, I felt hurt. How do I move past that?
Yes.
But Guerdy saw it as shots fired. And listen, could Julia still have been being manipulative? Sure, she could have.
Maybe.
I could be totally wrong. But I just think that Guerdy took it as shots fired and then brought like a machine gun to a water balloon fight.
Exactly. And I was like, what are you doing? You guys are moving past this. And I feel like Julia didn't know what she had done to irk Guerdy. And like, it is like Guerdy just assumes that, oh, well, Julia knows what she's done. But like, you can't assume that. And having a conversation with her and being like, hey, when you brought this up at the narcissism party, I thought we were past it. And then Julia was like, or that we weren't going to bring it up in the group. And she's like, no, I just wanted to get his opinion, because like, I am still hurt by some of the things you said, and I want to move forward. I'm trying to move forward, and I wonder if he had any advice. And then Guerdy could say, well, I took that as you bringing this conversation to the group. And then Julia could, say whether or not that was her intention or not.
Mm-hmm.
But it could have been handled so much better.
Right. Because like, as we talked about on part 1 on your podcast, is that when the road to hell is paved with like unspoken expectations. That's one thing we talked about on your
Guerdy
podcast.
Must have had some unspoken expectations on this like trip with Captain Sandy. They probably were very like normal expectations that Julia did not meet. That sucks, right? But at the same time, you have to communicate, and you can't just assume, like, if you were the one that feels hurt, it's up to you to bring up that you feel hurt. It's not up to the person that hurt you to know that they hurt you. They don't always know. Sometimes
'Cause
it's
we're not
obvious,
psychic.
and
Yeah,
sometimes it's
sometimes it
very
isn't.
much not obvious. If you are not actively like crying and storming off right after exactly what Julia did, how is
Mhm.
she supposed to know? You literally just sat there, and the only thing we heard from you was in confessionals that you took this as shots fired.
Right, right.
In Julia and everyone else's mind is that they thought things were getting better.
That's right. I think that for Guerdy, again, as a two-time cancer survivor, I think to have this big party for yourself and then to undercut yourself in such a way, it was just such a mistake on her part. But I mean, I understand it. I just think that so many issues would be resolved if people just talk to each other instead of saying, well, you should be psychic and know how I feel. No one
Yes.
should know how we feel.
And I
Like,
think, do you think it's because they're close friends that she's like, she knows what she's doing. She knows what I know do you know what I mean? That like they were so
yeah.
close friends. So that she's like, she knows what she's doing I know what she's doing when she does that. But I just hate making assumptions about friends, no matter how close you are with them, right? Like if
Yeah.
they say something that
Yes.
hurts you, why is your assumption that they're trying to hurt you?
Well, right. No,
That's such
that's
a
exactly
weird, like,
right. Like if you and I had some sort of like we would talk to each other about it immediately. And now listen, I know we're not housewives and that's not exactly how they work, but I just think that they got to figure out a way to make the show interesting, but then not to completely dive bomb all of their relationships in the name of like drama. And I don't even know if that's possible, but
and being
who knows?
right. Like they want to be
Yeah.
right so badly, and Guerdy wants to be heard, and I get it, but like she
We
talks a
can't always
lot
be
for
right.
someone who says she's not heard.
Well,
I
and
love her. She talks very quickly. This, I mean, I've mentioned on previous seasons that I have difficulty following her. She
Mhm.
talks quicker than probably anyone else I've seen on television, and especially when she gets like ramped up.
Sure.
And I'm just like, I'm trying to take it in, but it's a lot.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's just the key is just like communication, talking to each other, not assuming that everybody wants to take us down. And,
Right.
I think Housewives truly makes people paranoid. I think being on these shows, it
Yes.
definitely
Yeah.
makes you paranoid to, like we talked about, the games and who's in this alliance or who's doing this. And so, that's just a whole other can of worms. But was there anything else you wanted to say, my dear, before we wrap up? I think we
Yes.
covered a
I
lot.
thought it was really interesting that Martina and Julia went to the farm and invited, like, allegedly Julia's two closest friends who hate each other, Adriana and Alexia. And it
Mhm.
seemed like Alexia knew the boys better,
Yes. And
like
Adriana was very
irked.
jelly. Yeah, she was
Yeah.
jealous and hurt about that.
Like the fact that the boys like immediately one of them went into Alexia's arms, and that
Yeah.
she's like, "Can I have a kiss?" And he like
Put his
put
head out.
his
Yeah.
head close to her. It's clear that she spent time. It's clear that
Yeah.
Alexia and Julia have gotten very close. That is well
Right.
beyond just this show and well beyond an alliance. And I
Yeah.
think the viewership thinks it's an alliance and that it was strategic. And maybe that's how it started. But it is very clear that there is very, very real friendship and love there.
Yeah, because you can't fake a child's reaction. That's something
Exactly.
that
That was to me, that was like,
yeah.
they hang out.
Yeah, this is a kid who knows this woman, who loves this woman, who feels comfortable being held in her arms. And especially when we're talking about kids who were in foster care and unfortunately have had a lot of really inconsistent relationships with adults, that behavior doesn't lie. And Adriana was clearly jealous about it, but it's like, well, you got to put in the work. Kids don't respond to you showing up to a party. They respond. Kids' love language is play, is sometimes, touch and cuddle. I mean, appropriate. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how kids feel safe. And I don't think Adriana is, I don't know if that's her thing.
I just
don't know.
think she has been very, like, she's had her spidey sense up about Julia hanging out with Alexia and Marisol
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't like it. Like, she thinks that it's up to Julia to maintain the relationship with her, but it's really up to her to also maintain the relationship with Julia. And I think she thinks that this happens like all the time. But on Housewives, it's like, I think she thinks like, oh, Julia is talking to Alexia and Marisol about me. Like they're constantly talking about me, but they're literally probably just talking about the boys and the adoption and like things like that are going on in their lives. And it's actually Adriana is the one that maybe talks about them when
Right.
So she's like kind of projecting. And I don't know that to be true, but I feel like that happens a lot when there's these like unlikely alliances where it's like, oh, I've become friends with these other housewives that I used to argue with. And it turns out when we hang out, they never bring up the show.
Right.
You know,
but no,
like
I think you're right about the defensive projection, because the last thing I'll say is I talked about that with Jax on the Valley, the season finale. It's so like a lot of humans, we have these defensive projections that happen where we see our behavior in other people, or we see something that we do, and it's really about us feeling bad about us, but then we put that on other people. I mean, it's like Psych 101, the stuff that was going, like when Jax was yelling at Danny about like being, like a quote unquote drunk and like with women. And I think the whole audience like just cackled because we were like, that's you, Jax. But if I were teaching a class, that I would show that scene as an example of defensive projection. And I think with Adriana in this situation, I think you're definitely spot on about that too. So thank you so much, Mandy. Thanks for the extra time. I know we had a little technical difficulty on my end, and then it's been, So please tell everyone where they can find you in part 1, of course, of this podcast.
Yeah, so you can find me anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's called Is This Real Life with Mandy Slutsker. And if you want to get in touch with me on Instagram, I'm at Mandy Slutsker on Instagram. That's spelled slut, Sker. So you just type in Mandy Slut and I magically show up.
You just type in slut and she appears. But also,
claim to fame.
I do want to thank you for sharing, what I'll call your experience, strength, and hope with us at the beginning of the podcast. I know that's stuff you don't share publicly a lot. And so I just want to thank you for your sharing and your vulnerability. And I know that people will relate. So I just want to thank you for that as well.
Thank you so much.
To everybody, thank you for listening to this. And I can't wait for another M&M Hour. So please follow Mandy at Mandy Slutsker. Please follow me, your best therapist. And please give us some good reviews. That would really help us out. We'd appreciate that. And for today, please take care of yourselves and each other. And ta-ta for now.